Hello, and welcome to Pest in Class, Expert Voices in Pest Management. Today, we talk with Rachel Mendes, owner of Last Call Pest Control in Ontario, Canada. We explored her compassionate approach to customer service, her unique branding strategy, the transition into motherhood as an owner, and the importance of supporting small businesses. I'm your host, Amanda Salvatore. Let's get into it. Rachel Mendes, you are the owner of Last Call Pest Control in Ontario, Canada, and today we are discussing your unique approach to your pest control business and your experiencing balancing motherhood with owning a small business. Welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very excited. We have not really talked about motherhood before on this podcast, and I think it's such an important discussion to have. So I'm really excited to get into it today with you. But first and foremost, we start with an icebreaker. If you could name a band, what would it be called?
It would probably be something gruesome. I'm really into the death metal and the deathcore, so probably something like, I don't know, like Cockroach Dismemberment or something ridiculous like that.
I think it's appropriate.
It's a good one. I mean,
that's a great one.
I'd give it a chance.
It goes with the theme of today's episode.
I think so, for sure.
Pest control. It's perfect. Now, I would love to discuss your journey into the industry itself. Can you dive into that a little bit for us?
So, fresh out of high school, I went to college and I got my ECE, and I loved it. Like, I love kids. I love programming. I love sensory stuff. And I was in the toddler room at the time, and it was fun, but it just didn't fit. It just didn't feel right. So I was like, you know what? We're going to switch gears. And I got into death care, into the funeral industry, which anybody who knows me was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. Did that for a year and a half, around 2 years. And I had an injury at work. And I was like, oh no, this kind of just changes everything. The hours were really, really bad. It was really hard on the body. So I was like, you know what? Got to switch gears again, figure this out. And at the time I was bartending, and I was just kind of looking for something that was consistent. Days, predictable, something weird, something unique, something interesting. Like, I was never the kid in the dirt. I actually didn't even really like bugs until I got into pest control. I was phobic, to be honest, of a handful of bugs. When people say that they're super afraid, I'm like, well, I was too. And now all of a sudden I'm super, super into it. So I just was looking for a job. I found a mid-sized company, and I was like, okay, I got hired because I was comfortable driving in the city, driving in Toronto. They're like, you can run a route down there. And I was like, okay. So I did commercial for a year or so, and then I got into apartments. When I first started, it was rough. It was not the way that I do it now. There was a lot of old school methods, and I didn't really love that all that much, but I just loved the industry. Like, I knew right away that this is where I was supposed to be. After my first year, I got license after license. Like, our structure in Ontario, like, we've got structural, land, and water licenses, and I have 7 amongst them all. I don't use most of them, but I just love to learn. I love learning. If I could go to school for a living, I would. Like, I just love entomology in general. I love pest control. I just love this field, and I just sort of branched out from there. And then I worked for a small company for a couple of years, and then COVID hit. And that's kind of when everything changed for me, and that's when I got into Last Call, and now I've had my company since 2020. So I've been operating myself in Quinte West since 2020. It's been a bumpy ride, but I love it. I love every day.
What was it about pest control when you first started that really turned you on to the industry?
It was an industry that was unique and strange, and I really love interesting stuff. I really like the unpredictability. I like being on the road. I'm not the kind of person who can sit in one place and work all day. It's just never really been a comfortable thing for me. I've been driving for a living. I didn't want to have to live a life where somebody else dominated what I did. I just wanted something that was different, and I wanted lots of stories. I wanted all kinds of weird stories and experiences and stuff, and I found the right field for that, for sure.
I love this perspective. Very often when someone is entering pest control, they very much start with, I never expected to be here, and I found a great community, which I'm sure that is for you as well. But this idea of it being interesting and unique and being one of a kind is really unique to you. And I love that.
Yeah, it was what drew me to it. It was like growing up, we never hired pest control. Like I can't say that I've really ever interacted with anybody, outside of my profession who were, so it's not like, somebody came to my house and I was like, this is cool. It just sort of fell into my lap. Like I did another division when I first started at the first company I worked for. It was like hygiene, like feminine hygiene disposal and odor control, and just going from, again, another job where I was just going from place to place. And I loved the company. I just was bored. And that was why I was kind of like, oh, but they have a pest control division. Let me see about that. At the time, I was the only woman. At the time, I didn't know many other women. This is before the social media is what it is now. So back then I didn't have as much of a community. And I know that shaped a lot of my journey within the field is not having that sort of guidance when I first started. And then much later, I ended up connecting with a wonderful community, which I'm sure we'll get into later. And it's been a wild ride for sure.
I want to talk about your experience when you first started in pest control. You said they were operating in this old school way, and now you have your own business and you're really focused on being compassionate in the pest control industry, and that this is your superpower. How do you feel this approach sets you apart from others in the industry?
Well, when I first started, it was get as much done as you possibly can in a single day, which isn't always people focused. That is, profit focused. That's a really tough way to kind of operate. And, we were just going in and forcing people to empty everything and to just get sprayed and leave their home for half the day. And that experience made me start to resent multifamily housing. And I grew into kind of a calloused shell of myself. Like I have always been super compassionate. Like I have a lot of empathy for a lot of things. I have a lot of feelings. I'm a very sensitive person. And so I started to just not feel like myself. And that was when I was like, okay, I need to get back to who I am as a person. Like I worked in Toronto housing, and that was rough. That was hard mentally. That was really hard physically, but mostly mentally. It was hard. It was hard to be compassionate when we were not given the opportunity to be compassionate. We were not given the time. We were not given the support. That really sucked. Like that really made me feel like I was not doing a good job, and it sort of changed my perspective, and was really this sort of starting catalyst to me thinking maybe I'll just do this myself. That was when I decided, I was like, I have to get out of the city. Like I got to get out of the city. This is just too cutthroat. This is too rough and tumble. There are people like undercutting, and whoever can do the most, the fastest, it doesn't even, like you could go in and just be like, psst, and like, nobody would be the wiser kind of thing. And I just really did not like feeling like I was that person anymore. So when I started my own, I was like, let me get back to that. Let me get back to the compassion that sets me apart from other people. Like I find that a lot of people in this industry are a little abrasive. There's wonderful, wonderful people, but there's also a lot of guys who are just like, let's just get this done. Who cares? I do. Like I care. And that's what I feel like is the big difference. And that's what I pride myself on with having Last Call is we are trauma informed. We are compassionate. We have a lot of empathy for people. And the reality is that when people have, let's just say somebody has cockroaches, a lot of the time that is like a burden in their life. And if you can remove that one obstacle for somebody, you have made a positive impact. Everything that you can eliminate to make life better, I think is worth doing. I believe that everybody deserves to be pest-free. I don't believe that should be a luxury. I don't believe that should be a privileged thing. I don't think that there's anybody on earth that deserves to live in an infested home. Like that is just not right. I try to apply that sort of logic to everything that I do, that if I can do anything for these people, I can take this one thing away. I treat people like they're people. And I found that I was starting to feel like I was not treating people like people. I look back on that time and how abrasive and short and impatient I was, I try to sort of make reparations within my own heart about that. And I try to really apply the kindness of just treating people like people. And it is so easy to just treat people like people and to understand that there's a lot of layers for why people's homes are the way that they are. And I don't pass judgment. It's none of my business, like, let's just get you pest free. And then, you have extra energy and time to focus on everything else that you need to deal with. The last thing you should be dealing with is cockroaches in your home or whatever.
I love this mission. I do want to ask you if there's a business owner who is listening right now who really wants to change their perspective to a more compassionate way of operating their business. I know that you mentioned time, having that to be able to go into the home, have the time with the homeowner. What are other ways that an owner can support their techs so that they can operate from a more compassionate standpoint?
A lot of it, I think, is allowing your techs, your people, the time to get the job done, but allow them to answer the questions and to provide the information and to provide the aftercare. And like, if you're going, place to place to place and you have, 30 minutes per place, like, a lot of the time that's just not enough time. And people have questions, like, especially like if they've got children or if they've got pets or if they've got health issues or if they're just a curious person, like, to be so dismissive is just not very nice. And I think a lot of that comes down to time. And when you sort of put profit over people, that's where I think a lot of the compassion is lost. And so for me, and I remember saying literally since day one, is that my goal was never to be a massive company, to make an enormous amount of money. I just want to support my family. I don't put profit over people. If I got to spend an extra 30 minutes with someone who is having a really hard time with what's going on, I'm going to do that every single time. And I think that other owners can really take that into consideration and to do some digging into trauma-informed services and practices and understanding, that when you go in somewhere and, it's just layer after layer after layer of issues, you really got to step back and just be like, well, there's obviously something going on here. Like, this isn't, somebody deliberately trying to ruin my day. This is somebody who's having a hard time. Something that I've told my technicians is that when you go into somewhere, especially, you're going into an apartment, sometimes you are the only person interacting with this resident. Another thing that just kind of off sort of what we were talking about before is to change your language as far as, not referring to tenants as tenants, but referring to them as residents because they live there. Right. Yeah. And so, by using different terminology, you sort of give more personhood because, again, they are people. So I think that, teaching your technicians, and something that I taught my technicians, is that sometimes you are the only person going into this place. And if you see that this person cannot take care of themselves, they cannot take care of their home, they cannot do this, that, or whatever, sometimes you are that only advocate. I've been places where I truly believe that we've literally saved people's lives because they were sitting there on the floor and who knows how long they would have been there. So you make that judgment call to do whatever you have to do to get them the help that they need. You advocate for them because it's clear that they can't do it themselves. And if they choose not to take it, that's fine. And I think a lot of people have this, well, they don't want it kind of mentality, but like, sure, sometimes that's true, but a lot of the time that's not. A lot of the time they just don't know what the resource is. They don't know how to access it. And if we're going back to profit, like that increases your profit because it increases your reputation. And then people start to talk and people hear and understand. And, somebody's elderly mother, they have a huge issue, right? That person hears from somebody else that you were kind and patient and compassionate. They now call you for this sensitive situation. Like, I've been called specifically because I center my approach around being sensitive and being kind. And we've had people call us and say that. They say, I've read your blogs, or I've heard about you, so and so said something. And that makes me feel really good. And it makes me feel like it's worth continuing to do, even if you only impact one person. I still think that's worth doing. And I think that if we all just kind of had a little bit more patience with each other, I think everything would be better.
Yes, agreed. I love this mission. I think it's so incredibly important. It seems like it boils down to respect.
Yes.
For the individual.
It
really.
does. Yeah. And not looking down on somebody because you don't feel like, their sanitation is what it should be, or they're in low income housing. Like, you place these biases and these judgments on people when you have no idea what their life is like what they've been through. And so when people are like, give me a hard time, or, when people kind of have a rough day and they project it onto me, it's like, you know what? I don't know what you've been through today. I don't know what you've been through in your life. And it's, I've always been really good at diffusing these situations. I've been always really good at dealing with folks who have delusional parasitosis and anxieties and things like that, because I'm a little bit of an anxious person, and I can empathize with people who are struggling with something. And if they're vocalizing, if they're talking for a reason, you should listen to them the best that you can. And I try really hard to center my practice every day around that theory, around that logic.
Rachel, you're doing important work. I love it. I do. I love stories like this, truly. I want to pivot back to your origin story, if you will, that we were talking about you working in funeral services before entering pest control. It is a part of your overall aesthetic. It is
yes,
a part of your branding, and it feels so intentional and personal. If you go to Last Call's website, you'll see that the truck is designed to look like a hearse. Like, the branding is on point. I would love to know how your experience in death care shaped the way you approach your current work.
So a lot of it is that I have never seen anything in pest control as horrific as I have seen in death care. Like I said earlier, I was working more for a transfer sort of service. So it was like the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst things. You think of something horrific that happens to people, like, who's dealing with that? That was the company that I worked for. So I've seen some things, I've smelled some things, and there's nothing on earth. There's just no pest control situation that I've seen that has trumped what I've dealt with in that industry. So that's kind of made me, although since pregnancy, my sense of smell is just really bad, not good. Really too sensitive, not good. It's going to be hard to go back to work. I have had the iron stomach. When you're in that industry, it is very sensitive. You are dealing with people on some of their worst days. You're dealing with these people. And the experience that I had dealing with stuff like that, I apply that to my practice now, because that could be some of the worst things that have happened to people, is being infested with bed bugs. That is a traumatic event. And that's what I think is lost on a lot of technicians, is that this is trauma. Dealing with this invasion of your home, of whatever it is, it's trauma, and I think dealing with that kind of stuff has made me more sensitive to it. The whole branding thing, you're right, it was very, very intentional. So when I was talking about starting the business, it was just actually kind of an idea in the garage, with my dad, and we were just sort of talking back and forth about it. And we actually went to go look at a couple hearses, like actual hearses, because I've driven them before, but they are heavy, they are bad on gas, they are not for commuting. I was like, I love this idea, but it's just not going to last very long. So I'm like, what if we made a truck look like a hearse? Wouldn't that be funny? And then it was just kind of like,
I loved
and then
it.
it was, looking online, it's like, oh, well, I think we could find these Lando bars. I think we could find the coach lights. I think we could find a cap that kind of looks like my old truck had it was more of an angled cap. And so it did look more like a hearse, but they didn't have that for my new truck. They didn't have that size. So it was just sort of the whole, let's make the brand me. Let's apply the interesting aesthetic and vibe that I have to my business. Let's make it spooky. Let's make it weird. I wanted it to stand out, and I've never claimed to be discreet. So I've had a few people be like, oh, can you be discreet? And I'm like, well, no. Have you seen us? We haven't had an enormous amount of people be like, well, I'm not going to hire them because of their weirdness. We've actually had more people hire us because of it. We've had people call us because they saw us on the highway. I've had people call me I'm doing, I'm just at the library or doing whatever, and people see my truck and they call us because they see us out and about, and it's unique and it's something you remember. And that's what I wanted. I didn't want just a regular truck. I wanted something that people are gonna be like, oh, that was weird. What was that? Let me pop onto their website. If I need pest control, I'm gonna call these weird people that I saw driving around, right? That was my logic, and it's been very, very successful. It's worked out very well for us.
I love the idea of really creating a brand that reflects who you are. You're going to be showing up to these people's home,
Yes.
and to show up in like a button-up white shirt with a little logo on it with khakis does not feel like your
Oh,
vibe.
the khakis. No, it's not. It's
No
not.
offense to
No.
khakis.
Yeah. I mean, if that's your journey, but we are just not, that's just not us. We're very loud in our presence. And as a woman in the industry, especially when you go and you're knocking on 50 doors a day or whatever, you're talking to all these people. Half of those people are like, no, I wasn't expecting a woman. Right. And at the time I had red hair. Now when I call because I'm off the road, sometimes they're like, oh, I was expecting Rachel. And I was like, well, it's not. We're not surprising anybody. When they call us, they know that, we have a decent web presence. They know what we're going to look like. They don't, they're not like shocked, when they open the door and like they see like us with our weird trucks and our weird gear and our weird selves. They know that. And that's good to expect. Like, that's not something that some people, and I was expecting, like, I live in a fairly small town. I was kind of expecting not such a warm reaction, but people are quite amused by us. Like, it is kind of an older community in some regards, a little bit more conservative than we are, obviously. So I was kind of expecting a little bit more, yeah, kind of. But we get like just tons of responses and people just get such a kick out of it. And that was the goal. That's what we wanted. We wanted people to look, and they have. And that's how we've been able to be so successful is people are looking at us.
It's eye-catching and it's
It is.
incredible. I
It
love
is.
it.
It's fun stuff, and I love it. I'm just obsessed with it.
I know we hinted at this a little earlier, but you are a new mom.
I am a new mom.
You
Yeah.
are a new mom. You are in the thick of it. You have an
Tell me about it.
8-month-old.
I
Yeah,
do.
it's brutal. It's
It's a
brutal.
lot.
So, how have you balanced motherhood with owning a business? And what are some of the challenges that you faced?
With great difficulty some days. So my son was born in January of this year. Love of my life. Absolutely the best thing I've ever done. But I went back to work like 2 weeks after I had him. Just like administrative stuff, which now in hindsight is crazy. To be fair, I mean, it was January. We were pretty slow. It wasn't a lot of work, and he slept a lot at that time, but I did not. But thankfully, like, everybody knew, like, we had a big heads up. My girlfriend, she covered all of our stuff for us towards like the very end of my pregnancy and through a few weeks into January. So the phones just like diverted. That really eased a lot for me, was not having to worry about that. So she stepped in and she helped out like an enormous amount with the business in that regard. And then Justin was able to stay home with me too. So he stayed home for 3 weeks as well. So we didn't answer the phones. We didn't operate. We just, adjusted to our new little life. My mom does the phones for me now. Like, I give her the list of people who've called and she does all of that for me because I just can't. Justin helps me a lot, like with the invoicing, and I am grateful for the patience of our clients because there's sometimes where like I don't get stuff done for days. I've kind of gotten through it by delegating. That's a story in and of itself because I am not great about that. It took a long time of Justin working with me. I've been licensed for like over a decade and he's been licensed about 3-4 years now, 3 years, I think. And it took a long time for me to trust him enough to give him his own truck and to let him go and deal with all the stuff. We worked together for a long time before I was comfortable. And, that's not that I don't trust him. It's just everybody. Like, this is such an important thing to me. It took a long time for me to let go of that. And he's made me proud and he does a great job. And I made the right choice for sure. And it was his idea. He's like, I want something, consistent and, we could really build something cool together. And I was like, I never even considered that. This was years ago. And then when we got pregnant, it was like, this is perfect. Like, my parents are close by. He's due in the winter. I can work from home. I have not worked like a real job since I was like 14. So that was hard for me, making that choice to be like, do I put him into some sort of care and then go back to work? Or like, do I want to stay home? Can I stay home? Like, is that something that I can do mentally? It feels so right being like a stay-at-home mom, like working, but I mean, I'm still working. So like a working stay-at-home mom, I want to be home as long as I can. Not that I don't miss it because I do, especially when they get like a really cool job, like a really like, beefy wasp nest, or, like a really nasty bed bug thing. I'm like, man, like just send me pictures. Like I do miss it, but I think I would miss my baby more. And I
Mm.
think that I'm lucky to be home like this. This is a really huge privilege. Huge, huge, huge.
As a business owner or as a mom, I think you have to make the decisions that are right for you. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. I want to talk about this idea of trust that you brought up. You were talking about trusting your partner to go out and do things without you. I think that is a universal truth for many owners who are parents and even those who are not parents. So I'd love to talk about this idea of trust. How did you get over that hurdle? What is some advice to an owner who's looking to allocate a little bit but is hesitant?
It took time. Like it just took a lot of patience, and it was slow. Like it was a slow lead on into it. When I first started, I was given like a few weeks and it's like, hey, you're on your own. I don't want to do that. I want to treat this like an apprenticeship, teaching him all different scenarios and situations and pests and context. I wasn't comfortable letting him go on his own until I knew he had dealt with pretty much everything. So we treated it like an apprenticeship program. Like you're with me every day. We are riding along every day. And as the days and months went on, I would give him more. And then it got to the point where I'm like, I'm gonna stay in the truck and you're gonna go do this on your own. Or I'm gonna go to this unit and you're gonna go to this unit. I just kind of eased into it like that. And for me, it was already helpful because I already trust him. Like I already trusted him as my partner, to trust him as like my technician, and then to trust him as my only, like my main technician. By then, thankfully, we had already kind of gotten to that point, but it became a necessity towards the end of my pregnancy. Like I remember I was like 36, 37 weeks, and there was like this like really crazy bed bug thing. I was like, I have to come. I was like, I have to come. So here I am, just like, like waddling down the hall. I'm like, I need to see this. And I'm like, give me the steamer. Give me the steamer. I got to do it before I can't do it for a while. And that was like the last job that I did. And I just couldn't bend over to set the rat traps anymore. But I had taken the time. And so my advice to new owners would be to take the time, treat it like an apprenticeship. Don't throw them to the wolves. I would say, especially if they have no experience, but even if they do have experience, you want to break these habits that people fall into that don't suit your business practice. You got to take that time to show them how to do it. And it's sometimes a bit of a long process, but if you want to be able to fully trust somebody, you have to see how they are in different situations. Give them that hard thing that they have to do, and then you see how they react to it. And when you know somebody, you already kind of know how they're going to be about certain stuff, and that makes it a lot easier. Like when it comes time to like hire somebody, I do have somebody that I do want to hire when I do go to hire somebody. But if I have to hire somebody that I don't know, that's going to be really hard for me. To hire somebody that I don't know what their values are. Like I don't know what their integrity would be. I don't know what their experiences would be that would shape them into how they're going to react to certain situations. That's hard. Like, and I think that spending time with a technician, you get to know who they are and you really get a grasp on like, are these people trustworthy? Like, are they going to let me down? And the reality is that sometimes people let you down, and you kind of have to accept that it is what it is. And I'm not even going to pretend like it wasn't hard. I think the only thing that helped me is that I already knew him.
Yeah. Oh, I
I
believe
think it'd
it.
be hard. I
Yeah.
think a stranger would be hard.
I
Yeah.
hear that. I hear that. It's good to have a rapport before you even start. And
Yes.
also, I think that this idea of taking the time and really allowing yourself the opportunity to train someone works if they're your partner or not. Really taking the time
Yes.
to invest in someone is investing in your business and investing in
Exactly.
your people you're serving.
Yes, exactly. And so if you look at it like, well, I have somebody that I'm paying, but they're working with me, like you are making a long-term return investment. Like this is not like a short-term thing that is high risk where you're going to possibly lose everything. Like this is the long game. This is you taking the time to show somebody everything that needs to be done, and then they will make you proud for years and years to come. Like this is not something that you're going to have somebody for 3 months and they're not going to know what they're doing and they're going to be frustrated and they're going to have a bad time and they're going to leave or you're going to have to fire them. But if you give them that really good long period of time to make sure that they like it, that they interact with people appropriately, that they know how to do pest control stuff. And, I remember Justin got like a jewelry loop thing to look at bugs. And I felt so proud that day. He's like, I ordered something cool and he shows me and then he brings me home a bug and he's like, look at this bug. And I'm just like,
Look at you go.
I'm like, look at you go. I'm like, look what I've created. I'm like,
You're doing good
I
work.
just, it just makes me feel so good, like to see him have a passion for something that I'm so passionate about. And he has taken to it so, so well. We're totally partners in life and in work and parenthood and everything. And I'm really fortunate to have that as well, for sure.
Absolutely. We have just a little bit more time, but before we go, I do want to ask you, you have surrounded yourself in a great community of women, including Susie Rayner, who suggested you for
Yes.
this
My
podcast.
girl, Susie.
She is just the
I
best.
love
And I
her.
was
Yeah.
so glad that she suggested you to come onto the podcast. You have this incredible network of women, and I want to know what your advice would be to anyone who is thinking of starting their own business. I know you were very vocal to Susie to start her own business, Valkyrie Pest. And I just think you're doing so many incredible things. And I love that not only are you creating a very authentic business, but you're encouraging women and others to go out there and to start their own. So, what would be your advice to them?
I will always support a small business. Always, every time. I would rather compete, which I don't even buy into the competition thing, especially with women. I would rather compete against 100 little guys than one big company, because all of these little guys are feeding their families. They're taking their kids to swim lessons, doing things for themselves and for their families, and not for some guy at the top. I will, relentlessly support and defend and help and encourage anybody who wants to start their own. I have a girlfriend who started a business. She's just a little bit east of me. Susie and I, we have a little group chat, and we helped her with that. And I would do it again. And I would do it again and again and again, because I really value entrepreneurship. And I value the people who helped me get here. It was quite exciting because our friend Kaya, she started her business a few years before me. And then I started. And then Susie started. And then Paige started. Now we've just got this collective. And this is just the people that I know personally, that we have this collective of really cool, compassionate, fun women and moms who are doing it for our children, for our families. And it doesn't matter if it's like a technical question, if it's just you need some encouragement, if you need to vent, if you need to know like what the process is to get the insurance or to get, like this, that, whatever. Like, I just will always, always support it. Like, I sit on the board of directors for our provincial association, for the Structural Pest Management Association of Ontario, which is also, it was a huge professional goal for me. So I've been on the board for about 2 years now. And it's mostly small business owners who sit on this board. And I will fiercely defend and advocate for the small businesses against anything that is trying to like harm us or bring us down, kind of thing, like the regulations and all that kind of stuff. Like, I really, really love supporting local. I love the idea of it. Pest control is like my sort of my expertise, but I just support anybody who wants to get into business ownership. And it's hard. Like, I'm not even going to pretend like there's some days that are not incredibly difficult, especially as a new mom. But it's so worth it at the end of the day. Like, you're creating something for yourself, and you are not buying into this big, huge, let's get as much done as we can for as little as possible kind of mentality. You are elevating the quality of service. You are giving people dignity. You are improving lives, and you have a reason to do it, right? Because, like, your livelihood depends on it. Like, you have to do a good job. I'm so proud of the women that I have built this little community with. And like, I'm in my mid-30s, and I feel like at this point in my life, as a business owner, as a woman, as a new mom, I just feel like the community of women is so, so important. Like, the value that I have placed on my friendships with these women is so huge. I'm so grateful. I really am. Like, I'm really, truly grateful, and if there was another woman, I don't care if she's in the same town as me. Like, if she wanted to start her own, like, I'd be like, girl, you go, like, and I will answer those questions, and I will help you with anything that you need, and I will cover for you if you need to be off. And I know that you do the same for me, kind of thing. And it's just such a valuable thing. And I think that more women need to reconnect with the value of female friendships and get rid of this idea that the patriarchy has given us about competition with other women, and get back to supporting each other and empowering each other. Like, it really takes a village. And in all of the journeys that I've been going through in the last 5 years, I couldn't have done it without my girls, and I just love them so much. And I'm just so grateful for them.
Rachel, you are a true girl's girl.
I
And I'm
am
here for
such a
it.
girl's girl, such a girl's girl, always, forever, girl's girl.
I love it. And
Always,
thank
yeah.
you. Thank you for putting in the work. Rachel Mendes, I want to thank you so much for coming on to Pest in Class. I hope to hear great and wonderful things coming from you.
Thank you so much. It's so great to chat with you.